Welcome back, everyone. We're here just a few days before Thanksgiving, and tonight we're doing Metal Slug 2 and Metal Slug X on today's quick overview at Marco Collective Gamer CG77. Here we've got Metal Slug 2 for the Neo Geo AES, and this game came out, of course, published by SNK and developed by SNK back on February 23rd in 1998 in the arcades. Was released on the Neo Geo later on internationally in April 2nd of 1998, released to several different consoles like the Neo Geo CD, the Wii Virtual Console, PlayStation Network, iOS and Android, of course on Microsoft Windows, the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Neo Geo Mini, the Neo Geo Arcade Stick, and also even on Prime Gaming, and of course the Neo Geo MVSX. This game itself is the sequel to Metal Slug 1, which is of course a run-and-gun shooter by Neo Geo, and IRAM, of course, as a developer as well. This game does add some new weapons, some new bosses, and still maintains the high level of graphics, gameplay, amazing sound, and of course a good sense of humor, which the Metal Slug series is very known for. Metal Slug 2 could be a little bit, I would say, maybe the developers are a bit ambitious. They definitely were pushing the hardware at that time, and with all the different explosions and sprites of different missiles, weapons, just kind of flying through the air, enemy characters, there's definitely quite a bit of slowdown. And like most shooters where the screen is just filled, it does slow down, and in some ways can be a boon when you're trying to beat this type of a game. There's also some unique ideas, quite some funny tongue-in-cheek nods. So, for example, in the later Egypt level, if you do get hit by the zombies or the mummies, you become a zombified version of yourself. And when you're trying to use your grenade, instead, you'll actually kind of do this projectile kind of vomit. And you don't get affected by most other weapons, or at least by the zombies. But if you do get hit again, you will die. You do get a potion cure that can bring you back to normal. While you're on that kind of zombie state, you're unable to do any pickups or hop into any vehicles. They also, introduced some funny nods into the game. So there's, of course, like in the first game, you can pick up things such as jewels and different items in food. This time around, however, if you do eat a lot of food, you can actually become quite obese, at least graphically. And of course, there'll definitely be some references to that by the announcer itself once you do get big and become quite obese. And then when that actually happens, instead of using your knife, it becomes a fork when you become a much thicker version of yourself. And then grenades are also, become a little bit of a larger bomb. It will eventually wear off, but there's also going to be a dye powder, much like the potion that you get when you become zombie mummified. And in the sequel, they also included several different new vehicles in the Metal Slug pantheon. They included a camel slug, who's basically a camel with a Vulcan cannon. There's a new jet that's kind of like a Harrier, which they call a slug flyer, and also a slugnoid, which is kind of an exoskeleton mecha suit that can fire rockets straight down, specifically in battling a specific boss. There's, of course, as I mentioned, different power-ups that kind of happen when you're fighting the mummies in this particular stage, in stage 2. And as you can see right there on the video, there's quite a bit of slowdown once there's too many sprites on the screen. There's definitely quite a bit of crazy scenarios. I think SNK, once developing and working with IRAM, just basically let them go to town because the series became really, really popular again, thanks to the sense of humor, the amazing levels of animation, and the varied and inventive levels, enemies, characters, weapons, and power-ups that this series has really kind of been known for. And as aforementioned in the earlier part of the video, thanks to kind of the crazy scenarios and the different graphical flourishes that the game goes through, there is quite a bit of slowdown that does happen. There aren't really too many official ports of this game, besides, of course, the arcade AES and Neo Geo CD. Then after that, of course, they were ported over to other releases that were mainly emulation, like the Metal Slug Anthology collections, which you can pick up on the PlayStation 2. I believe they also even had a Wii version and I think a PSP version as well, which of course introduces a bit of load time. You can pick up the Metal Slug Anthology collection on the PS4. Limited run games definitely had a selection, and so did Pix and Love as well. And the way they got rid of the slowdown there was they basically amped up the CPU speed to kind of help fix and correct some of that slowdown. I've also heard that there's some fan-made patches that try to fix some of that slowdown kind of after the fact, but I have not touched or played any of those. And of course, SNK slash also IREM were very well aware of the slowdowns and the shortcomings of Metal Slug 2. Hence, they released Metal Slug X to kind of alleviate and answer a lot of the slowdowns that really crippled Metal Slug 2. Now, it doesn't mean that Metal Slug X doesn't slow down at all. There's definitely still portions that slow down, and you will see that on the video, but it's definitely much more reduced. They kept a lot of the same levels. Some of the enemies, both the kind of grunt or cannon fodder types, and also even some of the vehicles that they're riding and the scenarios that you face are slightly altered a bit. Same thing with the kind of the settings. There's now a night setting versus the day setting in 2, which you now see in X. So they definitely did alleviate and kind of reduce a lot of that slowdown that was prevalent in 2, which immediately helped the gameplay without really having to sacrifice any of the graphics as far as the sprites and the insane levels of animation and tongue-in-cheek humor that, again, this series is still very well known for. And of course, as you can see, a lot of the levels, as I mentioned, do remain the same. The times have changed. Sometimes instead of the day, it's now under night. Music's pretty much the same for most parts of the game. Some of the bosses have been changed. They're kind of swapped around to become later parts of the level. There's also a lot of new enemies as well. As you saw in Metal Slug 2, instead of facing the mummies that come out, they're now mummified dogs in the pyramid levels. There's also some new weapons, and also like the Iron Lizard, which basically has a kind of a mechanical homing, zooming device that goes across the floor. Definitely comes in handy when you're facing the mummy dogs, along with the drop shot, and of course the chaser, which is basically a homing missile that goes and actually homes in on any enemy within the screen itself. There's also, of course, enhanced versions of the regular games as well. So, for example, power-ups. So, if you picked up, say, 2 heavy machine guns, you actually will dual wield heavy machine guns as well. And of course, with the fixes, Metal Slug X became pretty popular, even ported to the PlayStation. Of course, quite a bit of differences. Their PlayStation being a 3D powerhouse did have to sacrifice a lot of the 2D animation in the game itself. And of course, can still kind of look around for third-party sellers like, say, eBay. Though, if you are looking for Metal Slug 2 or really any of the Metal Slug series, you are going to be basically hitting your wallet quite a bit. A possible valid release could go anywhere from about $4,000 to $6,000, sometimes even higher, especially if it's a very limited run of the game itself. No pun intended on that aspect. Fortunately, thanks to really emulation updates and also collections that have been re-released in really the past 2 years. You can also pick it up on the PlayStation 4 physically. It was released by Limited Run Games in the US and Pix and Love in Europe, but of course plays on all regions as well. You can pick them up on digitally as a title-by-title release, or as I aforementioned, the collections are also available digitally as well, at least for the Sony PS4. The collection is not available for the Switch versions. So unfortunately for those, if you are a Switch owner, you're going to have to pick it up via the ACA Neo Geo game releases. which average about $7.99 per game. These don't go on sale too often, but if they do, they'd be about $3.99 digitally on the Switch store. Again, one of the best ways probably to get it if you have a Sony PS4 or PS5 is to pick up the digital or physical edition of the Metal Slug Anthology Collection, which does have Metal Slug 1 all the way through Metal Slug 6. And actually, Metal Slug XX is actually also included into that as well. Um, this series of games is definitely one of my favorites. It's a wonderful two-player game. It is definitely hard. You are going to die often. Metal Slug X is a little bit easier, thankfully, because it doesn't slow down as often. But there's still a lot that happens on the screen, and fortunately, the whole series I think is, besides the King of Fighters series and pretty much most of the Samurai Showdowns series are pretty much one of the games. Oh, of course, the Fatal Fury series. I can't believe I forgot that series. Is really one of those series that really just stands the test of time. There aren't a lot of run and gun series, especially in today's day and age. I think this really captured a good pocket of time when run and gun shooters were really, really popular thanks to the arcade. And of course, they really, really gulf down your quarters. So being able to play this at home, especially with friends in a multiplayer or local setting, it is a blast, especially as you're going through and really getting to enjoy a lot of the little animation and graphical flourishes. Buying 2 or Metal Slug X, whether it be separately, I do, purchased it and picked it up on the Switch digitally, and even, of course, have the collection on the PS4 physically. It's definitely a lot better now. A lot of the slowdowns with the emulation for the new current consoles have really been fixed, or it's at least alleviated, so it's not as bad. You really only see that slowdown heavily, especially for Metal Slug 2 and the original hardware. Fortunately, with the new ACA Neo Geo releases on Sony, Switch, and Xbox, it's alleviated a lot of that. So if you want to pick it up on any of those, definitely have at it. If you're an Amazon Prime member, it was actually free. I'm not sure if they're still offering it. Fortunately, I was a Prime member and was able to collect it at that point in time for the Metal Slug and a lot of the Neo Geo releases. And with that said, thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and happy holidays.